John here from the Growing Guide, and I wanted to make a quick video about how I get a lot of questions. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, okay? And every time I get a question, I always try to take my time and always try to give a timely response and always a thought-provoking response. I always try to give the correct answer, okay? And a couple of people wanted to ask me, how did you develop the Growing Guide? What is your backstory and how you created this product? All right. And I feel I owe the customers that response. Okay. It's very simple. Years ago, when I was pretty much like you guys out in the horticulture world, and you go out and you buy an apple tree and you want to put something in the ground, you want something to produce fruit, whether it's a flower or fruit or something that looks beautiful, okay? And when I first planted my trees, I had a nice sized orchard. And one thing I found out what I was doing was I had a lot of questions, like a lot of people on the forums and communities, that what do I do next? Why is my tree growing this way? Why is my tree growing that way? What's going on? Why are my branches going upward? Why are they breaking? What's a bark inclusion? Things like that, okay? I didn't have these answers years ago when I was first starting out. I was a lot like a lot of everybody else. But I did take the time, and what I did was I went to two universities, Cornell and Penn State, okay? And a professor explained it to me very simple, okay? He said to me, pretty much, if you're in the fruit business or the nut growing business, he says, a tree is like a young child. If you don't train it when it's young, it'll just grow wild. And when he said that, I was like, wow. I said, because we could relate to our kids, right? If we don't train our kids to behave, they could be a problem. And a tree is no different, okay? Especially a fruit tree. Because if you just let Mother Nature take its course, it's just going to grow wild, and you could have a couple of problems on your hand with the growth and the habit and the health and the production, things of that nature. So I totally revamped, and I started reading and investigating. And I wanted to find a better alternative, how to grow a central leader tree in an orchard without using a trellis system. And I pretty much did what everybody else did. I employed the toothpick method. I employed the clothespin method. If the branches grow a certain length, I tried to tie a string to it and use a lead weight. And I just found out that none of these methods were working from tree to tree. It doesn't even matter the variety or the rootstock or anything. For me, it just did not seem to work out. So I'm a tinkerer. I like to invent things. I like to create things, and based on what the knowledge that I had. I started making prototypes, and I developed the Growing Guide out of necessity, and how I knew how the branch had to grow from the stem out like a trellis system on a wire, because you don't want a bark inclusion at the union where the stem meets the branch. That's not conducive for the health of the tree. If you get a bark inclusion, you could clearly see that's where, if any weight was put on the end of the branch, that's where the branch was going to break at that inclusion. Like, that's because the fibers of the tree are not growing in an upward downward orientation through the stem out into the branch. Okay, it's only growing up and not down. So there wasn't an even flow of the stem into the branch at the union, okay? And I knew that was very important. And not only that, you had to make sure that the canopy of the tree was open, okay? You had to incorporate more sunlight into the canopy of the tree. You had to incorporate more airflow to dry off the buds and the leaves, so you don't want any diseases, and one of the biggest things is fire blight, especially early spring when you have flowers and then you have a frost or you have moisture, and you could create a pandemic inside your orchard, and that's very healthy. So if you had more sunlight and you had more airflow, I said, I have to develop something that's going to force my branches out, and I have to get more sunlight, I have to get more airflow into the tree. And how do I create a stronger branch? And I started tinkering, and one day I'm going to show you the actual prototype that I used to come out with the Growing Guide. And I think after that, and how to get the guide to actually stay into the tree, I was using cable ties, which was very bad. And then a friend of mine who grows tomato plants, and he gave me a couple of the straps, the green soft straps that go around the stem of the tomato plant onto the shaft out of the ground. So I felt I would start using that. And then once I had a couple of prototypes, and I would compare tree to tree, one trained, one not trained, and you could clearly see the difference, especially from when the tree is very young. When those shoots are coming off the main stem of the tree and they're young and they're small and they're very flexible, those are the ones that you want to train. When they start growing upward and the fiber of the branch starts to set and the wood sets, you're not going to be able to retrain that branch. It's already set, and that's where you get the bark inclusion. So that anytime you put pressure away from the stem onto that branch, it's very hard to retrain, but you do have a tendency over 50% to break it. And so when I developed the growing guide and I brought it to market, people were very like, wow, that's pretty ingenious. And you know, that's why when we did bring it to market, retailers and distributors have picked up on it, and they see the worth and they see the value of it. And it does have 2 US patents based on its use and its design. And it was just a product that had to be brought to the market. It's very simple, because a lot of people that were like me early on are the people that I see on all the social media that are asking questions in the communities of how to train their trees properly. Please don't mind that motorcycle. It's just background noise. But anyway, I just wanted to tell the audience about how the growing guide first got started and why it was started and its use. Because one thing that I see, I travel to all over the Northeast of New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland. I'm all over the Northeast, and we have the website growingguide.com, and a lot of people are accepting the concept and the use of the growing guide in their orchard. Whether you have a home orchard, commercial orchard, or you just want a tree in your front yard, you want to train it properly, people are asking for the growing guide by name now in these retail stores and online. So I'm very fortunate and I'm very happy, and I appreciate all the business that the people have gave us over the years, and how we're increasing the business pretty much nationwide now, Midwest, Southeast, and the South Central. So yeah, I just wanted to give everyone an explanation as far as the origin of the growing guide and how we brought it to market. Okay, and I appreciate your time, and like and subscribe to our channels and our videos. And I thank you very much for your time, and have a great day, folks. All right, John from the Growing Guide, over and out.